Okay, so thank you so much for joining us for our August Alumni Mentor Chat. I'm here today with Leah Trotman. She's a 2017 graduate with a Bachelor of Arts honors in Global Development Studies with a minor in Indigenous Studies. As a student, she was very involved as the vice president of the Queen's Black Academic Society and also the creative director for the Vogue Charity Fashion Show. And she stayed involved as an alumni both through scholarship committees, the Young Alumni Advisory Committee, the Queen's University Alumni Association Board of Directors, and the Queen's Black Alumni Chapter, and also obviously through being our August Alumni Mentor and sharing her knowledge with us today. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Samara. I'm excited to be here and have a conversation with you.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be talking a lot about the equity industry and how you've taken your experience, being an advocate on campus and being involved on campus to creating a professional career within equity. So I just wanted to start off, if you could give us a brief overview of what you've been up to post-graduation and what you're doing now.
Yeah, big question. Post-graduation, I think sometimes I don't like thinking that far back because it reminds me that I'm just getting older. But yeah, since graduating, it's kind of been an interesting path. I know we're going to have a conversation about, how I really got into equity, diversity, and inclusion work, but I wouldn't say that was my clear path right out of school. So I think I graduated in 2017, wasn't sure, what the future looked like for me. I had different options in terms of pursuing my master's degree in journalism, going to law school, but I really took a moment to pause to say, hey, what do I want to do? And what was really the thing that I wanted to, I guess, not do for the rest of my life, because I believe we're humans, we change our mind and we shift and evolve as we go about. So I really took that summer after school to really think on that and just gain, experiences through passion projects, meeting new people, networking. Eventually, I did start off by going to RBC. I was working in asset management. It's always interesting when I tell people that, because clearly my path is not in asset management as it stands right now, but I had interned with them while I was in school. So, moved out to BC with them, was working in that field. But then while I was working with them, I transitioned and went into consulting and working in business development for Deloitte Canada at the time. So made a transition there. And throughout my time there, I've been someone who's always been community centered. So I've always been grounded in my volunteer work, always focused on how do I give back to my community, but also stay close to my community and really uplift people and really work together with people in the same way people have given me opportunities. So through my experience at Deloitte, I was lucky enough to get involved with the ERG, the Canadian Black Professional Network. And I was co-leading the talent section there while at Deloitte. Then in the, start of the pandemic, 2020, especially following the murder of George Floyd, my co-ERG members and I wrote an open letter to our CEO and executive team, stating changes that we wanted to see, things that we wanted to happen. We had a response and, those resulted in a lot of changes. But as a result of that, the person who was currently leading the ERG had stepped down and I had the opportunity to become the co-lead. And through a sponsor of mine advocating for me to be in the space, given I was doing a lot of volunteer work in the space, a role was created for me to do EDI at Deloitte. And I guess that's kind of the start of, not the start of how I got into the work, because I was always doing, I guess, that kind of work or really interested in that work, but the start of, officially doing it in what we call like a 9-to-5 type environment. And since then I've was there learning every day, I guess. And now I currently work in the media and entertainment industry, also doing EDI work. It's a new industry for me. I haven't been there quite long, but it's been really interesting, understanding how representation matters, advocating for why inclusion and equity should be centered in our design and our approaches, and how working in that industry, it affects what we see on, the news, what hits our TVs, when it hits our streaming platform, who's telling those stories, how we're telling those stories. So I guess that's a long but short answer of what I've been up to. And then outside of that, like you said, you mentioned started to stay really involved in Queens because it's important for me to, I think, just given my experiences, wanted to give back in a way that creates opportunities for maybe future students, current students, and future alumni to have different experiences. And I currently just mentor women who are at the beginning stages of their career and stay involved that way and put together classes on subjects that we may not have traditionally learned through our formal schooling.
Wow, that's incredible. I love that, equity wasn't really your initial pathway, but you sort of found yourself there and really, instead of pursuing an equity career, you pursued a career and made it equitable. I think that's a really cool pathway to your current role. So I kind of want to bring it back to your time on campus. You had a broad involvement on campus, and I'm wondering what you would say is the most impactful experience from your time at Queens and how it continues to impact you to this day.
I think, I find it always interesting, right, when people ask, like, what was the most impactful experience? Because I think it's like small moments that make great impact, and the accumulation of those small moments are really the things that change us, I think, without realizing it. But if I were to say, what was the most impactful thing during my time there, I would say community. I would say, it's interesting being a person of color, stepping on a campus, at least, when I was there, where not everyone looks like you and you're very much a minority, and it's very much felt, right? So I think through those experiences, I think community had the biggest impact on me. And I say that because it was through community that I think I was able to always be myself, be my authentic self. It was through, my community that I was able to advocate as a collective, and really come together to make changes, have conversations about things we wanted to see. But also it's through community that brings you joy. And I think I'm someone who always believes in centering joy throughout all of our experiences and what we do, especially in our work, especially in our school. They take up so much of our time. So I think my community is what impacted me, and it's what continues to impact me as I stay in touch with so many people, how we're kind of grounded in our relation to Queens, and how we've turned even some of our experiences, whether good or bad, to help formulate our purpose as we go forward in life.
Yeah, wow, I really love that answer. And I feel like your answer of community really shows with how involved you've stayed in the Queens community and how much you still contribute. Um, that's great. I loved in your earlier answer, you mentioned that you mentor young people at the beginning of their career. And my next question is, what advice would you give to Queen's students or to young alumni who are hoping to enter the equity field and have a role similar to yours?
Yeah, it's a big question. So I think, as I have conversations with people, and predominantly, it is often people who do want to, whether it's you want to go into equity, diversity, and inclusion, or you want to find a way to implement more practices or more equitable or inclusive practices within the work you may do. It doesn't necessarily have to be centered around EDI. So I think the advice I would probably give is to follow your passions. I think, at the beginning of this conversation, I kind of shared I was here, I was there, I was everywhere. But if there's one thing I always look back at, for me at least, is that people matter, and people have always mattered to me. And I've grounded a lot of my work and my thinking in people, relationships with people, and really creating human and inclusive design models as I go forward, how I have conversations. So I think it's, if that's something you're really passionate about, I encourage people to, have conversations with people, ask about what you could do. But I think there's nothing more powerful than self-advocacy. And, as I said that, you probably saw the hesitation in my face as I was saying that out loud, is because I think also at the same time, we do self-advocate for ourselves, and that's really important. But it's also, I acknowledge that it's harder for some, depending our positionality, depending on the identities we embody, or, the systems we're a part of, that self-advocacy isn't as easy as it's made up to be, just by simple way of access and opportunity. So as much as I say self-advocacy, I think what I mean by that is being vocal about this is where you want to be, and why you should be there. But then at the same time, I always tell people to, build their own board of directors as you build your career and as you go about, really center your relationships, keep in touch with people, because you never know when that person might need you or you might need them. And when I say build your own board of directors is, I think for me, and as I've, gone throughout my career, I've realized, luckily through a mentor of mine, is you do always need a mentor. And whether that's someone in your company or someone externally, but always having a mentor, having someone also separate from a mentor as a coach, so someone who can coach you through things, and how to do things and give advice, which would be different than a mentor, right? Because a mentor is like, hey, you could do this or do this, and here's what I did. A coach is really, when you think of in the simplest sense, what a coach does, right? They're at the game with you. But then also, I think it's really important to find a sponsor. I think sometimes a sponsor is, more internally, but also externally. But a sponsor is someone who is advocating for you, like they're running the race with you, removing barriers for you. And when you're not in the room, they're the person saying you should be the person, right? And I think if you're able to build your own board of directors and always seek that advice, I think that's really important. And never be afraid to reach out. I think for so much of my early career, I was always afraid to reach out to people, but I think I'm learning more and more people are willing to have conversations. I mean, people love talking about themselves. Let's get real. But more and more just reaching out, asking to have conversations. And it's, honestly, as we have this conversation, if anyone is interested in getting into this field, like I encourage them to reach out to me and we can just have conversations on, what that might look like, because I do think it's a field that has drastically changed, especially following, the murder of George Floyd, where I think it's not that this work hasn't always been here, but I think this work, the way it existed before, or at least from a mainstream perspective, it still excluded a lot of people. And when you thought of diversity, oftentimes we thought of, women and gender binaries, like in gender only in a binary sense. And often when we had conversations about women, it was to the benefit of white women, right? And so how have we expanded to think differently? And I think just having conversations about how it's changed is really important, and it needs more people, more voices at the table. And it is challenging, but I think, there's opportunity to look beyond the challenges and look at the possibility.
Wow, thank you so much. That is great advice. As somebody who is interested in a career in equity, that's really interesting advice. And I love how community-centered it is, like leaning on other people and mentors in your field is really important, especially in equity. So that's lovely to hear. So the last question that we have time for today is, what has been your favorite thing about working in EDI professionally?
Awesome. And I'm just going to go back to the comment you just said about, it's really interesting. And I'm excited to hear that, this is maybe a career path that you would like to pursue. And I'm sure you'd be amazing in it. I think also one thing I was going to say, as you look at like pursuing these types of field, like it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to, differentiate between, are people just window dressing, or are they really rolling their sleeves up to make systemic changes? And I think those are conversations that we can't be afraid to have. And then, sorry, what was your question you just asked?
What has been your favorite part about working in EDI professionally?
I think it's kind of, I think I probably touched on this a bit, but for me, I think it's community. And I think it's interesting because when you're in this space, you're not siloed. You're not really ever working alone. You're not only ever working with your team. You're touching every part of a business from an internal and external perspective. And you're really working with everyone while trying to build that call-in culture where you're bringing everyone in. When I think about it, although the experience is in the space, and I'll be honest, like it's not sunshine every day, right? I think, the work can be really heavy. It can be exhausting because, we live in a times where I think the world is becoming increasingly and increasingly more divided. So it's really about how are we bringing people along? How are we helping people understand why this is important and why we do this work? So that's what I mean. It's not sunshines and rainbows every day, but my favorite part is that I do get to work with people, and every day I get to do different things. I'm challenged every day. I have to think differently every day. And I think I do this work, and the people who do this work is because this work is us, right? We're informed by our experiences, I'm no stranger to difference or being made to feel extremely different. And I think when you hone in on that and ask the question of why, it motivated me to always want to be like, so how do we change that? How do we increase access? How do we ensure opportunity? And, I think I've accepted that maybe these changes might not happen in fully, at least in my career. But I think what I'm most devoted to is changing it for the people to come, to ensure that the people that come after me have opportunities that maybe I and others might not have ever had, and that they have, a place where advancement is accessible, where opportunity is always visible, right? And where people see themselves, but not only just see themselves, but also feel like they belong where they are. And really where we're all just being treated equitably. I think that that's really, really important. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in this work. And I think we're just hitting the cusp of what it could look like. And ultimately, like I said earlier, people matter. I think people, for me, are at the center of everything. And without people, we can't have businesses. And I think businesses are such an impactful part of our world and the changing world and the influence that they have, that we want to ensure that, they also, do the right thing and get it right. So we can kind of all, I guess, corporate lingo, win together, right? In the name of progress. Yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I love how honest that answer was, sort of addressing the bad with the good as well. But that sounds like a really fulfilling career.
Yeah. No, and I was gonna say it's interesting too, right? It's not work where you're always going to be at the forefront, right? And I'm someone who always likes to say, I like to be the stage manager, right? You're not the actor of the show or the star of the show, but the show can't go on without the stage manager. So it's not always like this, glamorous roles, right? It's very real stuff, and you're dealing with people, you're hearing people's real experiences, you're going against or trying to at least break down and build up like different systems that have existed for so long. So I think, when you're in the space, it's so important to, number one, protect your mental wellness and health, because I think, especially as, based off of my identity, I'm not only trying to solve for different things, but you're solving for things you're also experiencing at the same time. And sometimes that can be heavy. And these are conversations that a lot of us in DEI often have, right? So I think it's really important to increasingly protect, your mental health, be mindful of possible burnout, acknowledge that it's okay to pause, right? And it's so okay to pause, because I know it's like everyone in this space wants change, but it's okay to pause sometimes. And I think also to just holster and center empathy is really important as we go about things and as we have conversations with people. Yeah, and just at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that there's mutual responsibility and enablement across the board, and everyone's there for the right reasons.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that insight. I love how community and people-centered the work that you do is, and how community and people-centered your approach is. So it's been really lovely to hear more about DEI work from your perspective. I wish that we had more time to chat, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today and for being our August alumni mentor. And I really look forward to seeing all the great things that you continue to do as a Queen's alumni.
Thank you so much, Samara. I really appreciate you having me and chatting with me today too. And I'm excited to see all the things that you do and all the things that you'll accomplish, and everyone else, I think. And yeah, I guess just follow your passions, right? Your passion and your gut never lead you in the wrong place. At least I hope not. And yeah, hopefully we'll stay in touch and continue to learn more and work in this space together.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.